Many years ago, a group of 12 of us teens went on a backpacking trip to a Southeast Asia country during term break. Among the things in our itinerary, we had wanted to stay in a mini theme park casino hotel area situated high up in the mountains. Only thing is, we were bad at planning, to say the least, and pretty much just thought we could bunk anywhere at any room in any hotel. We didn't book in advance. It was peak season, unfortunately, and when we got there, no good hotel could accommodate us. In the middle of the night, we had to wander far from the lights of the main resort, down into the other side of the dark, desolated mountains. See, other than the resort located at the very top of the mountain, there were very few people living there, nor were there many establishments around the other areas of the mountain. It was dead quiet. The journey to find a place to spend the night at 11 p.m. was unnerving, to say the least. The mountainous areas away from the main resort were completely devoid of life, and tall trees surrounded us from all sides along the main path. Beyond these trees were unmanaged, dark forest, and pretty much no one ever went up into the forest. For obvious reasons, low human traffic in places other than the resort. The street lamps around this area were poorly implemented as well, and the entire area was pretty dark, mainly illuminated by the dim, pale glow of the moon. We walked quite a distance in these conditions until we saw a large, empty car park with a rather dilapidated hotel in the middle. There were what seemed to be a smatter of large black char marks at the side of the hotel, creeping up all the way from the 3rd to the 9th floor, indicating that there had once been a relatively huge fire in the past. On all sides of the car park, you could only see tall, intimidating trees looming ominously, obscuring the light from the moon. The only light from the area came from the rundown hotel building, without any street lamps to illuminate the car park. Clearly, this area in general had been neglected for quite some time. The car park was desolated. In fact, there was only one dusty car parked near the hotel building. To be honest, some of us in the group were very apprehensive about staying here. But between walking aimlessly in the eerily silent woods, staying out in the cold of the night mountain air, and staying in a very least hotel type establishment, the choice was clear. Either way, we would only be staying for 3 nights. What could possibly go wrong? The interior of the hotel was a lot less menacing than the outside. Though evidently aged and slightly musty, the professional smiles of the receptionist at the front desk assured us that this was a functioning lodging space. We asked for a room with the cleanest living conditions, and they booked us in at the highest open floor, the 12th floor. For whatever reason, they told us that 2 of us had to be relocated in a different room, far from the rest, as they had other patrons filled in every room on that floor. This struck us as odd because the hotel seemed extremely quiet, and at times we wondered if we were the only guests. Nevertheless, we agreed. Me and a large burly friend decided we would take the corner room for 2, as we didn't care too much for games through the night and constantly interrupted sleep. The corner room seemed peaceful enough, and well, someone had to make sacrifice after all. This roommate was the person in the group of 12 that I had known for the least. He was a transfer student who had just joined my class at school recently. He was a religious foreign classmate from Africa, older, and his habits, culture, etc. were all very new to us. There was much we did not know about what he did during the time before he knew us. That and his imposing stature, exotic, unfamiliar appearance made it slightly more intimidating to be trapped alone in a dark room with. However, from my interactions with him, he seemed rather mild-mannered and quiet, so I was not opposed to sharing a room alone with him. "Is this hotel haunted?" one of my friends half-jokingly asked the receptionist. They paused for a moment, looked at each other, and gave an ambiguous polite smile to him as if he had just told an inappropriate joke. The elevators were small and could only fit about 9 people crammed in side by side. Me and my roommate and this other guy took the second lift. Strangely, the lift stopped at the 6th floor, and what we saw when the door slowly parted spooked us. The entire floor was pitch black, and the walls were charred and everything was burnt black. It was clear that after the fire had devastated the level, no attempt to repair the damages had been put into place, and the entire affected floor were condemned altogether. We peeked outside the elevator, and there was not a soul in sight who had pressed the floor button, so we figured it might have been a glitch in the elevator system. It was a really old hotel after all. We talked about this with the other group of 9 who had just gone up. They mentioned that their lift, on the other hand, had mysteriously bypassed the 12th floor and stopped at an unnumbered floor just above, presumably what was once the 13th floor. Once the lift door opened, what they saw sent shivers down their spines. It seemed like that floor above held some kind of singular unit right at the end of the corridor, perhaps what might have been an old presidential suite. The door right in front of them was completely sealed up from top to bottom with thick metal chains, boarded with wooden planks and stuck with spirit-warding amulets and Chinese talismans. The entire floor was dark, and the only source of light was being creepy red candles lightened in front of the door. Clearly, the management of the hotel was greatly disturbed by whatever was in there and had gone to great lengths to keep it from being unleashed onto the residents of the hotel. They said they had frantically mashed the button to close the doors and got down to the 12th floor. To be honest, contrary we all had seen thus far, the 12th floor was not too shabby. The hallways were decently lit and cleaned, though there was a musty old carpet smell that filled the air. All in all, it seemed livable, unlike the nightmarish scene we encountered on the 6th floor. Me and my roommate made our way to our unit, ironically numbered 1212, at the end of the hallway next to the stairway. Upon entering, a gust of unusually cold air engulfed us. The room was clearly worn out. In the dark stains on the wall, heavy scratches on the wooden furniture, and creaky beds. The toilet, well, it was much worse. The mirror was slightly cracked in some areas. Faucet had heavy indented scratches, and we could have sworn we saw traces of long hair and what seemed to be residual dried blood stains at the dry corners of the tub. There was a dreadful, heavy feeling in the room, but neither of us knew why we felt like that. We had an early rest that night, and although the toilet lights switched off mysteriously and the toilet flushed on its own in the middle of the night. We chalked it up to a faulty switch and continued sleeping. Nothing much happened that night. On the second night, I had problems sleeping. Having drunk too much energy drinks at the theme park that day and stayed all the way up to 3 a.m. in the morning, lying in my bed, playing with my headphone. If I recall correctly, it was at 3:16 a.m. that night things started to get weird. The TV suddenly switched on by itself with nothing but static on the screen, then turned itself off. The toilet door slammed incessantly and the faucet sounded like someone repeatedly turning it on and off 3 times in a row. Somewhere from behind the wall beside my bed, you could hear the muffled whisper of a lady continuously uttering, "Where is it? Help me find it." But that could have been guessed from the room beside. Despite all this, my roommate somehow managed to stay fast asleep, leaving me to face the horrors. Suddenly everything stopped and the room was eerily silent again. I turned to look at my roommate, silently hoping for him to have been awoken by the ruckus so I had some company. No reaction. He was facing the ceiling, blissfully unaware of what was happening. 10 seconds of foreboding silence passed. Suddenly, he turned towards me, eyes still closed, and said in a deep, unnatural, raspy voice, "I'll kill you." I stared at him in shock, half expecting him to jolt up. Nothing. It seemed like he was still fast asleep. Was he sleep talking? I did not sleep that night. The next day, I complained to the receptionist that the next door neighbor was causing quite a ruckus at night and disturbing our sleep. The receptionist shot me a puzzled look and told me the neighboring unit had been empty for the past month. The last night was the worst. I did not have much problem sleeping that night as I was absolutely exhausted and dozed off at about 10 p.m. And at around 3 a.m. again, I suddenly woke up to a screech of furniture moving in the unit above and violent, frantic footsteps. I rubbed my eyes sleepily and wondered what all the ruckus was about. It was then when I saw 7 black figures in my room. 6 of them were standing around my roommate's bed, staring at him. 2 on each side of the bed, and 1 stood at the entrance of the toilet, facing the bathtub. This figure seemed to have its neck craned downwards, looking for something on the ground. At that point of time, I thought my roommates must have invited our other friends in or something while I slept. So in my groggy state, I did not pay much attention to the black figures. After all their attention seemed to be focused on my roommate. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Everything was eerily still. All of a sudden, he started moving strangely. The bed sheets rustled wildly, and I realized he was actually slithering off the bed upside down, arms pulling his sleeping body along, one at a time. Upon reaching the floor, he plopped down, motionless, facing the ceiling. Freaking out, I flinched. Immediately, all the black figures rapidly swiveled around the sink. The figures had their attention on me now. They knew I was awake. They knew I had seen them. In tandem with the figures, my roommate violently arched his back, head hanging upside down with an erratic jerk. He contorted to the left where I lay. I was absolutely terrified. I knew I was cornered in this dark room. My only source of light was a tiny glow seeping through the gaps of the curtain. I could barely see where I was going. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you. I'll kill you." He chanted these lines fanatically on the floor, arms and legs twitching wildly. His eyes were still shut. At that moment, I turned my back, frantically searching for my phone for some light. "I'll kill you." A menacing whisper blew across my left ear, and I felt two cold hands brush my neck. I instantly jumped out of bed in fear. There, he was on the bed right behind me, head upside down, crawling up from the floor beside my bed. His hands were poised to strangle me, fingers outstretched and tense in a peculiarly inhumane manner. Lips quivered into creepy grin. I dashed toward the main room light switch and flipped it on. In an instant, the room was flooded with light. My eyelids slammed shut and I flinched for a second, adjusting to the sudden influx of brightness in what was a pitch dark room an instant ago. When I opened my eyes, the black figures were gone and my roommate was sprawled out of my bed, asleep, completely ignorant as to the terror he was just a minute ago. I noticed that the rosary he kept by his bedside had snapped into little beads as well. I took the chair, sat down, and watched him the entire night with lights on, fearing he would start attempting to strangle me again if I fell asleep. Trying hard to stay awake, I whipped out my phone and began looking up history of the hotel. Women found beheaded in gruesome hotel murder. August 16, 1998. 30-year-old lady violently beheaded by her husband, with a chopper found missing from the hotel kitchen. Her body was found floating in a pool of blood in a bathtub, with her head placed next to the faucet on top of the tub, eyes still wide open in terror, facing the door. I took a look at the picture, and one of them was a picture of the room taken from the outside. Never had seeing 4 numbers give me such a feeling of dread. Room 1212. It was our room. I glanced at the toilet door nervously and instantly felt a cascade of goosebumps rush down my spine. It was as if her gaze never left the door. Apparently, the arrested husband swears he had been sleeping that night and woke up suddenly to find his wife murdered, with his hands covered in blood, holding the chopper. No one believed him. Police ruled it a homicide. Till this day, my roommate had no idea about all that happened that night. I told him he was sleepwalking and that I was playing games on my phone the entire night after waking up and not being able to sleep. My friends all know about what really happened, but we agreed that keeping it from him was the best thing to do. We found out from the janitor before leaving that the hotel room at the unnamed floor was once the site of traditional folk ritual that the hotel owners had organized in 1997 to ask the spirit for help boosting in Isling Hotel's business occupancy. Apparently, the ritual went tremendously wrong, and all 6 of the mediums invited lost their minds and started decapitating each other with kitchen knives, smearing the entire room with blood. That year, a massive fire devastating most of the hotel as well. The unfortunate incidents finally stopped when they brought in the renowned temple priest to seal the room. Room 1212 was right underneath the sealed room. Always check the history of your hotel before staying in. If you don't, you might never get to leave.